Stuckler here. This is this week's Fast Track Live on mastering research proposals. We've got several proposals that you've sent that by the end of the session, you're going to have a framework for understanding how to craft a winning proposal, the same framework that I've used to win over $10 million of competitive grant funding from the likes of UN organizations through to the European Research Council, private foundations, national governments, and more. So you're not going to want to miss that, because your ability to raise funding and convince others of the importance of your research is something that's going to make a difference to you starting right now, all the way through the end of your career when you become a professor like myself and have a big research team and go on to do good and great things. Before we dive into that, and before we dive into your other questions this week, I'm going to jump straight into this week's quick tip. And the quick tip today actually has come from several of you who have been asking me, Prof, what is the best AI tool to use for research? And so far I have to say, I have not really been convinced by almost any of the tools that are out there until now. And I want to share that with you. So I've shared my screen, and this one here, I'm about to do a video for the YouTube channel about it. It's called SciSpace, and it really advertises do hours worth of reading in minutes. And I think it's really important for you guys to have a framework of how best to apply AI at different points in the research process. As you know, I've really liked, I have promoted ChatGPT for others. The kind of open access, the free model can do a lot of powerful things. But this one, I think, is particularly good at certain points of the research process around two things. One is when you're really kind of trying to figure out your topic, where you want to go, and just get a quick sense of the literature. I'm starting to feel like Google Scholar is the old way of doing your search, and this is the new way. So if you ask a question, say here, for example, you can see some that I've been mapping out with students, say impact of sustainability-linked loans. I've been thinking about green financing lately and how banks can catalyze change. And what this can do that's pretty cool, I'm actually going to make the screen a little bit bigger so you can maybe see this a little bit more, is it will give you the insights from the top 5 papers. And you can specify this to say, I only want top tier papers, which I recommend you do with this tool. And the other, it'll kind of give you the headline, say, well, these top papers aren't really looking at these specifically. And that's already helpful for you to know if there's a gap or what they're calling for. What else you can do, though, that I like in your filters is you can actually specify what things you want to pull out. So say, maybe I'm looking for gaps. I actually just want to look at limitations of papers. And here you'll see it'll pull out a column just on the paper's limitations. It's still loading up here. But sometimes when you're reading through papers, you might just forensically want to go look for things in the papers, and this can help you do that. So, okay, it's cutting off a little bit the way I've set up my screen, but you can see here, you don't have to read the paper and kind of forensically go and swoop this out. This has done a lot of that for you. So this can save you a lot of time, and I think it's pretty cool. It's got one other feature that I want to highlight that I think has a fair bit of value for you, and that is its Copilot function. And a lot of you have shared with me that sometimes, especially if you're new in your field, that the papers are just difficult to read. Sometimes they're difficult because they're just terrible and they're not written well. And other times it's just because the material is quite complex. So let me show you an example here. I've uploaded a paper just now. You upload a PDF, and you now have kind of Copilot, it's like your little buddy helping you here, that you can interrogate it for questions. Now, you can do this one of two ways. One is you can ask questions about the paper. If you don't understand something in it, you can ask your Copilot tool to help make that clear, right? Say, please rewrite and explain the abstract in very simple 8th grade English. Oops, and I obviously cannot type and spell at the same time. So it'll spit out something like that. But more importantly, for example, if I'm still at the stage of trying to harvest gaps, I'm going to maybe ask it, hey, I don't want to read this whole paper. I just want to see what gaps it's got. Upload it here and ask it to tell me what the gaps are. And you can see this makes it really, really simple and accessible to understand, stripping out the jargon. And again, things like this, explaining math and the table, can really help you get the point and not get bogged down in a lot of technical details that may happen, especially to you at the beginning of the process. It also poses more questions. Why is there more research needed? But if you say here, suppose I'm looking for gaps, what research gaps does this review article point to for future studies? And this will, again, it almost, I never say blindly trust AI, but if you're in this kind of scanning phase, this is pretty good, and it's already telling you kind of what we need. Global indicators here. We need to uh, right. Saying there's scanty literature, so some of this you might still have to dig through. But this global indicators is pretty interesting on performance and disclosure. So I might, take this, put this on my gap sheet, and then quickly move on to the next paper. So let me know what you think about this, guys. I actually, because I have found this to be helpful to a range of different students, I have negotiated a bulk discount for members of the FastTrack grad community, and that is using the code DavidS40 for their annual package and DavidS20 for their monthly one. There are not kickbacks coming to me for this. I've negotiated a discount because it's one of the tools that I do think can work. It also has the open access free version. It just, you kind of run out of tokens that then reset for a while. So give it a try, play with it. You have nothing to lose. Again, I think the tools that are there to paraphrase and do some other things, I don't really like so much. Those are the 2 points of value that I think you'll get from it. Okay, so let me come back now and let's talk about proposals. So the way I want you to think about proposals for a second is maybe a little different from how you've done before. I want you to put yourself in the mind of a funder for a second. And let's just imagine this in a more simple way as say, a business. Suppose, you're a funder, you're sitting on a big pile of money, and somebody's coming to you with a proposal for asking you effectively for money. So if somebody is asking you for money for a project that they want you to support, what things are you going to think about? Again, this is that classic way of reversing the nouns, of putting yourself in their shoes. And this is really important to do, especially when there's money on the line in research. So I'm going to check the chat here and see what you guys think about. What are some things that, if you were the funder, you would want to make sure are in place, and what would convince you to fund a project? And as you're going to see, that this thinking is going to lead us exactly into a framework on what winning research proposals need to have. So I'm going to give you guys a couple seconds. Jump in the chat, and I can see Sue has actually joined in the studio, and we're going to look later on. Sue, good to have you. We're going to look later on at a question Sue had on systematic reviews. So that's cool. As always in the session, we have time to take your questions at the end. It's really your time, your chance to get feedback and guidance from us. Okay, so one thing that's obviously, if you're a funder here, that's going to be quite important, is you want to see, right, like what kind of return on investment is there going to be, right? Am I just dumping money into a black hole, or is there going to be some kind of return? Like, what's the payoff going to be? What good, right, in this case, financial good is it going to create? So that return is really, really important. And it's going to be a key element of your proposal as well. And exactly. And so Zishan's kind of already anticipating things. Do they want it to be, right? Do they want to know there's a published paper or product? And exactly, you're already kind of foreshadowing where we're going to go a bit with this. But a funder wants to know, hey, if I'm putting money in something, what's the return going to be? In the group, somebody said something else. Is it feasible? So you may have this cool Elon Musk type idea to say, I want to get a rocket to Mars. And they might look at this and say, can you actually do that? And when they might say, can you actually do that? They might be thinking, can you personally actually do that? Are you able to do this? Do you have a track record of doing this? And they might look at it as well to say, like, just is what you're even proposing possible? Does it make sense? Can you do that in, say, the timeline or the plan that you have? So that feasibility is also really, really important. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Okay, what else, guys? What other things could be there? So somebody says here, is there a real need? I like that. But remember, my point of view is as a funder. So that need is, what is that need? Need according to whom? So let me kind of reinterpret that. And actually, I think Tal here, hey, Tal, good to see you again, as always. Always love when you can join us. That need, when you're a funder, ultimately that need is what you define. So for example, if you look at one of the biggest funders in global health, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, if you go look at their website, it says their funding is driven by the passions and priorities of Bill and Melinda Gates. So ultimately, that's their passion and priorities. It doesn't say we're driven by needs in recipient countries of what the biggest health challenges are. No, it's driven by what the funders are passionate about. And so what Tal says is really important, funders, is this idea of fit. So even if you say to somebody that, hey, this is going to have the biggest return, it's great. But if they say, well, I'm just not interested in that. That's not what we personally want to fund. You're kind of barking up the wrong tree, right? It's like you're knocking on the wrong door. You're great. These pearls that you have, this great idea, it's just going to fall in deaf ears. So this idea of fit is very, very important to be aware of and to communicate. The other thing that I want to point out too, kind of links a bit with feasibility, and that's risk, right? And investors often think of this language notion of risk and return, and it's a little bit on feasibility, but right, there are some projects that just may inherently have a lot of risks associated with them. It could be ethical and reputational risk that they don't want to get tangled up with. So this is really important to be aware of. And for some of you, I want you to really think hard about these 4 dimensions that we've just mapped out. So the return, the feasibility, the fit, and the risk. Because these are all areas and things that you need to address. Some of them are going to be more important depending on where you're at. So for example, if you have already been accepted to, say, your PhD program, you already know there's kind of a fit for your interests. And you may not have to go quite as far as in terms of communicating fit. And maybe the balance is going to be really towards feasibility, and so you can actually do what you say you're going to do in the time that you have. If those programs really need to see, for example, that you're going to publish papers, that return is going to be papers in published journals. They need to see that you have a clear idea that meets an intellectual need in the field. And so that's really, these elements are going to vary over time with funders. When I go to a big funder like Wellcome Trust or Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I am studying carefully what they're looking to fund. I'm mapping out what they funded. I will always go to the recently funded projects and kind of reverse engineer and make sure I'm mimicking those as closely as possible, because I know that that's on the money. That's what's won money from them. And so I'm going to try to be in that space. I even go so far sometimes as to mimic their own language, because sometimes they will have people executing kind of just evaluating proposals for them that are just ticking boxes. Say, okay, Mr. Bill Gates wants this. We need to make sure that this proposal ticks this box, this box, this box. And so I will make sure I tick all those boxes on fit. And that's going to help put your proposal to the top of the pile. So our classic framework, and guys, ask me any questions if you have this. For the vast majority of you, because the vast majority of you on this channel are either early in the grant journey, or you're trying to get your proposal approved for the next steps in your master's or PhD or that part of the journey. And so the most important elements we've captured in a method called the GIFT method. And kind of it's because your project is your gift to the world. And that GIFT method satisfies all these elements if you get it right. So the G is the gap. You need to understand kind of where your field has come to and where it's fallen short and needs to go next. And like I just showed you before, SciSpace is a pretty cool tool that can help you map and harvest these gaps in a way that you would conventionally have been doing with Google Scholar. So you need to get real clarity and present that clarity on what is the gap. What do we know and what do we not know and need to know? So once you have that gap, you say, there's this big gaping hole, there's something we really need to know. That's when you come in with your idea, your winning idea that's going to plug that gap. And hopefully just that, right? The gap and your idea should be in communication and contact with each other and make sense, right? So it can be very simple and clear. And this is like the return component of that investment. So they see, aha, this is, okay, I can see how there's this big problem here. And this idea is going to plug that gap. And there's a clear payoff to that because we need this. So those are the two big elements of the gift, the G and the I, the gap in your idea or intervention. The next is the F, the feasibility component. And especially for the PhD stage, or any stage really, I think one of the big mistakes people make is tons and tons of background. Say, I've read lots of literature, I know my topic inside and out. And they do lots of summarizing, but they don't do proposing. And this is a shift in how you present things. Instead of saying, right, and so Ben and colleagues found the following and this, and say, instead you need to shift your mind in proposing. Say, we're going to do it this way because that's what Ben and colleagues did, and that's the best practice in the field. So you still are summarizing literature, but all that literature is connected into kind of what you're proposing to go do. So I see lots of rookie mistakes around presenting lots of background, literature, and summary, and very, very light on feasibility. The idea of feasibility is you want to paint a picture and show them that you can actually do it. And a big part of that feasibility is convincing them that not just is it methodologically sound, but you can do it. So if you, for example, you have to go, I ran into this problem. I ran into trouble because at one point I wanted to, I was studying some historical data in the Soviet Union, and they said, well, look, you don't speak Russian, and we don't think you can learn Russian in 3 years for your PhD. And so I actually did not get funded for a National Science Foundation Research Award because that was a missing component. They just didn't believe that they thought it was a great project, great reviews, but they didn't think personally I could do it or that I was the right person to do it. And you can get kicked out for that. Sometimes they're looking for reasons to exclude you. So especially if it's very, very competitive. So that feasibility is both methodologically sound and whether you personally can make it happen. And then there is this element, like I said, on the feasibility of also fit. So if you have, right, I've been working with a student and she wants to do, she's in a heavy qualitative department, and she's proposing then to do a very sophisticated meta-analysis of meta-analyses. And the department may look at that and say, well, we actually can't supervise this. This really isn't a fit for our expertise. We want to invest our expertise in those who are going to benefit from it and things that we can be more confident that we can get to the finish line. And you can run into problems for that too, because that's just gonna, if there's not that, I would hope by the time that you're in your PhD, you have that fit, but you're gonna really you're gonna feel like the gears grinding. You're going to start having tensions with your supervisors in your program. And I see many students have many problems with that because they might have gotten accepted to the BSc program, but they're really not a good fit. And that starts to come to the fore during phases of feedback on their proposal. So those are the main elements. The last one is the timeline. So especially as a PhD or master's, we need to make sure that you can get the project done in the time you have. This is not the time to win the Nobel Prize. Nobody wins a Nobel Prize as a graduate student. This is the time to really just focus on ticking the boxes and getting it done. And save some of your best ideas, especially the ones that are maybe higher risk, higher reward, that are going to take you longer. Save those for later on, when you maybe have the security of a permanent position or a longer postdoc that can give you a little bit of breathing room. So with that in mind, we're gonna take a look at a proposal that's been sent to us, and we're going to look to see to what extent these gift elements are in place. Before I do that, I want to take a few of your questions. So here, when you've spotted a gap, does it have to be in recent literatures? I think this is a very good question. And ideally, right, you want a gap to say, well, this was a problem in the 1970s. Isn't that convincing? So a recent gap that lots of prominent people in your field are talking about is a pretty good sign. It's a pretty good sign that, right, we talked about before, that there's going to be a return here. There's a payoff, that this is going to publish well. So yeah, I like it to be in recent literature. Some departments will even specify to say, I want I want to see that there's recent activity in the field publishing on this topic, and that there's somebody kind of pointing to that there's a gap here. And here we go. We want the ranges the reason. Okay, so we've got a few questions, guys. I'm going to come back. I see Julia and Alpha Tech asking about some artificial intelligence tools. So let me come back on that, and I think we'll have more dedicated sessions on it. Again, I'm responding to your feedback that you're wanting more on this. At the end of the session, I'm going to come back to that, so stay tuned. So we're going to cover research proposals. I'm not losing track of your questions, and I have some things I want to share with you on those different points. Okay. So let me share my screen again and pull up this tool. So this proposal. So let's see, where did I drop this? Okay, so here it is. And guys, I want you to really try to look with me and look for yourselves, because right in reading just the first page of the proposal, you should already get a sense of what the gap is and where the author is taking us in terms of idea. And not all gaps are created equal. Some you can see like, wow, this is important. This is going to be important to a lot of people. Some gaps you can look at and say, well, this is maybe if you want to publish in a high impact international journal, they need to have something that's going to speak to an international audience. So here we go. I've got this. So thanks so much. Thanks so much for sharing with us. I hope you guys can see this. I'm going to try to zoom in. Can you guys see this, by the way? A little bit. I'm gonna zoom in and maximize this more so you can see it. So hopefully that's here. I'm gonna screen it. So okay. So here's the proposal. Take a couple seconds, and then let's come back and talk for a moment. Let's communicate with this paper about the two elements of the gift: the gap and the idea. So just scan with me. First paragraph. So, okay, guys, looking at this, I'm going to come back to you here for a second. What's the gap? It's a little bit of a trick question. What gap is this paper setting out? I know it's a little hard to see when I've said it like this, but what gap is it? Let me see if I can zoom back out. What gap is the paper trying to set out? So while you're thinking about that, one thing here, there's a bit of a challenge. So this is going to be about investigating attitudes of managers towards LGBTQ individuals in the workplace in Lesotho. And we're starting off talking about gender inequality. And that's a bit convoluted. Gender inequality is important, but that's not really what this is about. Obviously, there's a link and areas around discrimination. Discrimination in this case, that men, women, trans, other categories are treated differently from each other. But this is about sexual orientation, as I understand it. And this is going into kind of a tangent on minorities. So I think if you get straight to the point, and the problem is in this first page, I think you've been struggling a little bit here. Here's somebody who said, got it. Yeah, somebody got it here. Acceptance of LGBTQ. But so this is a problem. So, and this is what I was going to say. It was kind of a trick question because this here is a problem, but we haven't shown it's a research gap. So, right, that can be me saying, poverty remains a stubborn problem in the world. That's true. What's the research gap? There's tons of studies published on poverty every year. What's the research gap? So the point here is you need to get faster through the gap. We've got to scan through a little bit more to try to find the gap now. So let's try to find the gap. So we've got problem, and exactly. So problem here, we're now kind of going into the context of Lesotho in this problem. And here's the issue. So I think you can see here, we're going into now proposing the study, but we haven't set out any gap. So if you're the funder looking at this, you're thinking, well, where's this going to publish? Where's the debate? I can see acceptance is an important problem. But I don't see how this paper on Lesotho, and of course this is a problem in Lesotho, it's a problem in Indonesia, it's a problem right where I am in Italy. Why is this going to speak to some international debate and discussion? And what's so interesting about Lesotho? But this is what you're going to choose. So already I'm very concerned about the gap, and without the gap, I can't really calibrate what your idea is speaking to here. And so that makes me worry a little bit. So I hope you guys can see that if you're looking at this, that the authors may have something incredibly important to say. This case study in Lesotho might be fascinating because a recent law kind of went into place and changed the dynamics around acceptance in workplaces. And that has something to say to the international community that maybe hasn't changed laws recently or haven't really made the case of what we need to know. In fact, hasn't even summarized what research has been done on acceptance other than this big macro quantitative study that looked at, kind of how there's lots of variations in weak acceptance in some areas, not others. So that's really a problem. I want to go through now and look at the kind of feasibility of the idea. Has the proposer here painted enough of a picture to convince us that he or she can actually do this? So what we've seen quickly is that the proposer here is going to go interview managers in different firms. So they need to convince us they can get access to managers of these firms who are very, very busy. And if it's a socially taboo issue, they're going to also need to be able to convince us that they can get people to talk about this in a way that's not just going to give you the correct political answer, but it's going to give you the real answer. And that's not methodologically simple to parse out. Tal's got a comment here, and I always like when Tal jumps in because he has some really good insights, having published recently several. And Tal, I think you just got another systematic review published, so celebrating another win from the community. That was you can hear Tal's story on my YouTube channel, and now Tal's amazing, and it provides mentorship back to people in the community. But yeah, regarding the problem statement, so even this is Tal saying this case represents a specific issue, and maybe not even the entire problem. Yeah, I think that's right, Tal. So well spotted. And this is also what's helpful, I think, about the power of community is you can get very close to your topic and you can start losing sight of the big picture. That's why having a community and people you can bounce ideas off of can be so helpful. The proposer here said that she was doing this for the first time and wasn't really getting any feedback. And that's what I find with many of you is that you don't get feedback regularly. Some of you have to wait weeks and months on feedback. And that's exactly why we've created membership communities so that you can get feedback even on a daily basis, and you can really tap the power of community. So if you're ever interested in that, join the Facebook group, get in touch with my assistant, Marina, and we can connect you to the right community and the right base of support for you so you don't have to swim around with a lack of feedback. Because what I can see about this proposer is there's some great ideas in here, but we need kind of to sprinkle it with a special sauce that's going to take this to the next level and help convince his the department that this is going to be publishable in an international journal. There's a real debate here. That there's a real gap, and the idea is going to fit it. Tal's pointing out that the methodology is going to be qualitative. Yep, 100%. So let's go look at that now. I'm going to make the screen a little bit bigger, so hopefully you can see this better again. And so let's go down. So some objectives they want to say, and this is the problem here. I just don't see why this is going to be. So imagine, you have to imagine the return here, that return on investment we're talking about. Okay, so you go show, let's say you even show, yeah, well, Lesotho managers really have, they really are discriminatory towards these individuals. Where are you going to publish that? It's going to be very, very hard to publish. If you say what you're more likely to find, because they're probably not going to voice that, is say, yeah, we really want to create a tolerant work environment. What's the news there? Why is that going to get published? What's there? So I hope this makes sense and you guys can see the challenge there. So let's go through here, and you can see this makes the contributions of the study also a bit, unfortunately, a bit too vague. Okay, so then there's a long review. We're going to skip past the review because this is, again, not connected. And this is what I said about proposing. This is lots and lots of background, but there's no proposing. So this all needs to kind of flow in and say, well, maybe lots of this has been done in the US using these methods, but it's never been done in Lesotho or Sub-Saharan Africa more generally. So we're going to use their approaches that have been tried, tested, and worked well elsewhere and use that here. But that's not what's happening. So this is just lots of background that's not proposing, and that doesn't really fit. I mean, if I'm a funder, I'm reading this, why do I care about any of this? And you can think about it. If you're funding, you're thinking about, well, what's the return? Does this show it's feasible? Does this show fit? No. None of it's relevant. It's not bad. It's just not relevant to a proposal. Okay. So here we go, methodology. So you're going to adopt a scale to measure attitudes. And okay. So this sounds like you're going to actually you talk about doing interviews. So it sounds like you're going to do a self-administered, so you're going to do some questionnaires and you're going to send it. So how are you going to send it? Is this going to be email or mail? Are you going to get their names? And again, what is this really, really going to show? Are you going to ask their own sexual orientation and see how that influences things? And then what are you going to do with it? So you just said, okay, where are you going to identify these managers? How many are there in the insurance industries? Which levels are there going to be? There's a whole lot of details missing here. Also, why will they fill this out? Response rates are very, very low. So imagine you get a 10% response rate. You send this to 100 managers, you only get 10. You start to question the feasibility. So this is, you can see you've got all this stuff on background, and this is what I see often in proposals, tons of background here. But when it comes to actually proposing what you're going to do, this is it. And this doesn't say anything about the analysis or how you're going to take that to the next level. Tal was foreshadowing that this would be more qualitative. Now it seems like you're going more quantitative with it. So just the feasibility is completely lost here. So I think there's good stuff here. And I like what you're doing. I just think we need to cook it a little bit more. And yeah, and Tal's saying too, what's the research question? So listen, a big thanks to sharing this with us. I hope, in this case, this actually illustrated all of the elements of the gift method that need a little bit of work. We want to tilt the balance of this proposal to much more proposing. And right before going too far, make sure you've got crystal clear clarity. It's almost a tongue twister. Crystal clear clarity in your mind about what the gap is and how your research idea is going to plug that gap in a way that's going to be relevant to international audiences for publishing. Okay, at this point, I'm going to go through and look at a couple other questions that came this week. So Siraj writes and says, sir, I want to write a research paper for that. I want a guidance. How can I apply for that? Like I said a moment ago, get in touch with Marina in the group. And we've had lots and lots of people do their first paper through our support. And as you know, I'm a big evangelist for systematic reviews. because of the many, many benefits it will bring to you, especially, and I would recommend this to our previous proposer, it will really bring in laser-like focus what the frontier of your field is, what are the recent methodological gaps, and help you identify the low-hanging fruit where you can make the biggest impact in a short period of time. And Tal, if you want to comment maybe below what that systematic review process has done for you and in your career, and maybe even it can be even on an emotional level, maybe your feelings of confidence and direction. I think it would be great to share that feedback in your journey. But I strongly recommend those. So if you haven't done a research paper before and you're really at the beginning of this journey, that I believe, without doubt, is the best place to start. Okay, then we've got Esther. Esther has a question too. So Esther writes, Dear Professor Stuckler, hope this email finds you well. My name is Esther, and I'm writing to seek your guidance on a few queries regarding PhD research and proposal development. First, I'm keen to understand the distinctions between a PhD thesis and a master's thesis. Could you please elaborate on what typically sets them apart, particularly in terms of scope and depth of research? That's a great question. So oftentimes, if you think about it, the average master's thesis might be about 10,000 words. The PhD thesis might be towards 60 to 80,000. So even just on the length, the sheer volume, you can see a PhD thesis is about it can be about 3 to 4 times a master's thesis. With a PhD thesis, and with a PhD generally, you're expected to have demonstrated that you are contributing and pushing the frontier of knowledge in your field. And you're going to have independent people, and this is unlike the master's, you're going to have independent experts from the outside of your university who are going to look at your research, evaluate it, and say, hey, yeah, just like a peer review of your paper in a journal, they're going to look at it and say, yep, this passes muster, this has made a contribution to the field. And that's when they say, hey, congratulations, shake hands, welcome, you are now Dr. Behrman or so-and-so, welcome to the field. You are now part of the club. That's the PhD thesis. The master's thesis is more showing that you understand research methodologies and you can apply and execute them at a high level. There's not really an expectation that you're going to do a master's thesis on a publishable level. So often it can be just doing a rich data analysis with the methods that are commonly applied in your field and show that kind of mastery. You need to be able to write an effective literature review as part of it. Sometimes master's theses can also be systematic reviews, but usually the bar is not nearly as high. And you can also see it too in the PhD because it's so long. You often have this proposal stage that has to be approved by your supervisors before you go on to actually carry on and do the research. The stakes are not quite as high for the master's. There's not really that same deep kind of vetting process of your proposal. So I hope that makes sense. I really like when you can do a master's thesis that kind of points in the direction of where you're trying to go in your PhD, because usually in that master's thesis, you'll have done your first literature review and gotten some solid background in your field to know where some gaps are that you really want to dedicate time and energy into pursuing as a PhD student. Okay, then Esther asks, I'm contemplating utilizing established scales in my PhD research. Would you recommend using established scales, or do you suggest revising or constructing new ones to better align with research objectives? Well, if you're going to construct a new scale, that's a whole study in its own right, to say, here are these scales, but the problem with these scales is the following, and that's why I had to make a whole new scale. So coming back to our previous example, somebody might say, well, there's this global acceptance index of LGBTQ, but I think that scale really isn't capturing the right things on acceptability. So there's a gap. And my idea is to improve the scale by collecting these new questions from managers. Maybe I think this global acceptance isn't really fit for acceptance in the workplace. So I'm going to try to update and adapt that scale to the workplace. Or maybe that scale just doesn't fit for the cultural realities in sub-Saharan Africa, so I need to adjust it. So you can see then how with that gap, you're starting to engage in a bigger conversation. I tend to adopt established scales. Because often you want to use those scales to look at relationships between different things, and the scale is not the contribution in its own right. So in that case, I would rather kind of that cliche of stand on the shoulders of giants, stand on those established scales, so you can put kind of the novelty and focus on the good stuff, which you're trying to do with those scales, and not get bogged down in critiques about those scales themselves. I hope that makes sense. Lastly, you say, Esther writes, I aspire to pursue my PhD studies in Germany while exploring educational issues prevalent in my home country. How can I effectively communicate this intention to potential professors and convince them to consider my proposal? Well, that's kind of articulating the return we just talked about. So if you're going to say if your home country is Lesotho and you're doing a PhD in Germany, you're going to have to overcome this hurdle of explaining, well, why do the professors in Germany care about what's going on in Lesotho? I have a passion for global health, so I inherently care, but not everybody is like that. And so it's really important you can convince them that this case study sheds a big general insight, that this really makes an incision into reality to say something much more profound that you might not be able to see if you were looking in Germany. So that's the direction you need to go. You also need to scope out potential professors and find a fit. I can't emphasize this enough, that you need a good fit. You need to find somebody who's going to be a mentor and not just a supervisor, somebody who's kind of in your corner looking out for your interest and not just slotting you into helping them achieve their dream, but somebody who really wants to help you achieve your dream. Again, many PhD students get slotted into fulfilling the dream of somebody else. I want to make sure you've got a supervisor who's more like a mentor in your corner that wants you to thrive, succeed, and achieve your dreams. Hope that really helps. So now I want to come back for a second on AI tools, and then we're going to circle back to Sue's question where we're going to do a live demonstration Web of Science on searches. So on AI tools, somebody was asking, let me come back, for what is this like, if you could decide on only one research platform to invest on a monthly license, what would you choose? Right now, for me, hands down, that is ChatGPT, upgrading to the 4th model. Right now, it just as an all-encompassing package, as being kind of your personal writing coach and giving you feedback, is the best. Any of the tools out there right now searching the academic literature, they're getting partial access to the literature, and I just don't think they do that good a job. They can do a good job for initial scanning and sweeping, but what ChatGPT can do is really act as your kind of personal writing coach, and I just think it's very strong. Right? I don't have any sponsorship or get any money from them. I just, for me, what I personally use, what our students have used, that's the winning one right now. I've recently come across SciSpace, and I found that has functionality for particular things around reading challenging papers, forensically pulling some things out. There's another tool called Elicit that can do that partially, but when we tested it out, we really weren't happy with its. We weren't fully happy with its accuracy. Of course, this is a rapidly evolving space, but this idea of an all-in-one research platform, it's just, I haven't seen it there. The functionality, again, I say that now, this could change in a matter of a month or 2 months. So stay tuned for this space. We're going to review more. I think a lot of people are really attracted to AI because I think it's going to help them find a lot of shortcuts. But the real shortcuts that you're going to find are going to be through effective mentorship. That's what saved me the most time. So, right, when people go through our step-by-step systematic review course, they can do a systematic review start to finish in under 3 months and have a publishable manuscript. And that's without any AI tool. Without effective support and guidance, many fail many times, can't get it done, and it takes them years. So your real shortcut, your real AI, which is tapping into a super intelligence, is find the right mentor. There's just that's what's going to save you so much time. Tap shortcuts, not waste time, not go in circles. And the closest to that, to being able to interrogate or have a chat with somebody as though they were a professor right now, is ChatGPT. Again, there are many tools. I think a lot of students are looking for these AI tools to do things for coursework and that sort. And that's good. But at the level of kind of high performing research, apart from like specific models that have been like machine learning models and other tools, but as the actual research, tapping AI and deep learning networks to accomplish specific research tasks, for the nuts and bolts of your research, all I found so far that I can personally promote, that I recommend to my own students, is ChatGPT and SciSpace. But guys, again, if you want me to review more specific AI tools, let me know, and I'll create more videos reviewing them, and I'll give you my honest take on what I think of them. free from the influence of sponsors, and you guys do need to take it with a pinch of salt, because I get contacted by a lot of sponsors. A lot of the folks you're seeing on YouTube and others, they're getting kickbacks for what they're recommending to you. So take it with a big pinch of salt. And also, you got to be careful about getting yourself in hot water with your university. That's why we have a whole video instead of training on how to use these tools in an ethical way. All right. So I'm going to bring Sue. Hey, Sue, I can see you're there, kind of lurking in the shadows. So I don't see you on camera, but I know you're there. Sue is doing a systematic review, and she wants to look at how leadership styles can shape retention. So, and I'm going to come back to this question. Sorry, Alpha Tech. I saw I missed your question. I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Guys, it happens to me. I get lots of questions coming through here on the stream, so I sometimes do miss some. So I'm going to come back to that. And so Sue's looking at the impact of leadership style, and see if certain kinds of leadership influence whether employees stay or go. And so we're going to pop that search or initial search into Web of Science, and I pulled Web of Science up here, and we're going to take a look at that search and kind of help troubleshoot some of the challenges that it seems like Sue's been facing. So we're going to come into the search, and we're going to go right into advanced search, and we've got it here because Sue already kind of sent the search string. So she wanted to look at leadership, so anything with a parameter here of leader. Let me see if I can make this bigger so you can see. I'm going to have to shift it like this. So anything here with the term leader, and some different parameters here for retention. So let's add this to the history. Did this add? Hang on a second. And what's going on? Oh, here it is. It's down here. So that's getting about 4,000 hits. That's a lot of hits. So we're going to have to find a way to narrow this down. But let's first go see how many of these are relevant to the research question. So kind of scanning through, I can see this one is systematic review. You're probably not going to review reviews. So that's going to be out. And we can already see several are looking at specific sectors. So you're probably going to have to find a way to narrow this down. A lot of these are in healthcare. You may decide that you don't want to look at healthcare and you're going to exclude healthcare. Here's mediating roles. So let's just see here. You want things that are research articles that have some kind of analysis or data. And so this is a good one. So this would maybe be in there, but this is job crafting. So I'm not sure this job crafting is a leadership style. So you have to check that. It's saying meaningful work, but I don't know if that's a leadership style. And so when I'm looking through the first of these, I would be tempted to advise you to say, maybe take out healthcare because there's just tons on that already. And you're going to already cut this down considerably. As far as your search, the other thing that I'm not really seeing is the leadership term isn't coming out so well here. So I want to see where that maybe has gone a bit off. So sometimes here, it's not really leadership style. It's just saying lack of supportive leadership. So I think you might want to specify leader and go back and be more specific about leadership practices like this one and leadership style, because some of these are just paying lip service to the term leader, and that's leading you to get a lot of so-called false positives or things showing up in your search that you're not going to need. But just these 2 tweaks already, I think, are going to cut this by about 2/3 and get you closer to what you actually want. This is an iterative process, so it's not like there's a silver bullet. You're going to have to pilot this a little bit. But Sue, I hope that makes sense. Those are the tweaks that I recommend making right now to get this to the next step and get things unblocked. Okay. Julie says, thanks for answering the question. I'm going to take one more question here, the one that I missed. So an artificial intelligence tool that arranges a research paper according to journal style. Well, usually journal style it's not really going to be able to quite do all that for you in the sense. What do I mean by that? Well, So you need to change references to be the reference style of a journal, which EndNote or Zotero can already do for you. You don't need AI for that. Your title page is already going to be kind of set up in a way that in your field you can kind of chop and change and swap out. Then there are other specificities. If they want, say, what are the main highlights box? Well, it doesn't take you that long to just put in a highlight box. So I see why you might like this, but if you've kind of formatted your manuscript accordingly and you've used a reference manager, you wouldn't really need this tool. So unless I'm missing something, Alpha Tech, if you could clarify a bit what you really want, that would be helpful. But unfortunately, I'm not aware of a tool that does this effectively, that you can kind of blindly rely on it to get that formatting right. Yeah, in some cases, it's just faster to check the journal's formatting requirements and do it yourself. Akash asks, how can I choose a good topic? Well, we have a whole convergence method training on choosing a good topic. And in that training, we look for the convergence between feasibility. So you could do your topic. That there's a debate in your field in that area that you can see in terms of there's citations and activity on your topic. Especially nice to see that there's recent activity, not something that was talked about in the 70s and everybody forgot about. And that you're passionate about. And don't lose sight of that passion part, because research is hard. It's a long slog, a long journey, and you need that initial passion, and then you need to protect it. And you need strategies to protect it, because I can't tell you how many people come to me and say, oh, I'm just so burnt out. I'm so tired of my topic. I don't even want to look at this monster anymore. I'm like, but you loved this just a couple of years ago. What happened? And a lot of things went wrong along the way to get to that sad point that many students come to me. And when the reality is, by that point, it's already too late. But at least you need to start off and have a burning passion that you cannot wait. You're excited to work on this topic. You're excited to tell your friends. It's Friday night, you're at a cocktail party, and I was talking about injection needle sharing programs in HIV, and because I thought what I was doing was super cool. Maybe not the best thing to talk about at a cocktail party, but I want you to have that kind of blind obsession with your topic that you love it so much, because that's going to help you through the roller coasters that you're going to hit as you go through all these different micro hurdles along the way that you've never faced before, that are going to beat you down, leaving you feel tired and sometimes deflated. So passion, feasibility, and debate. Get those three things right, and you are well on your way to a good topic. And Akash, I'm always happy. We have chat groups in the Facebook group where always happy to take a look and give you feedback. I mean, Facebook group is the best way for us to be directly in touch together, and for you to get more rapid answers to your questions, to get that quicker, more stable, more regular feedback that just a lot of you guys really need to truly thrive, and you've been missing. So everybody, great session today. Really excited for the next ones. I'm going to put out again next week a call for your submissions. If you'd like to see your research reviewed, or a dedicated mini training for what you're struggling with right now, or you just want some unfiltered, unbiased advice without financial conflicts of interest, or without feeling like you have to be scared in front of your supervisor because you want to only put yourself in a positive light. That's what we're here for, collectively, a community to help each other and produce the best research possible. I had a lot of trouble along the way as a graduate student, and I made this community because it's what I really wish I would have had, with training on writing, on presenting, on proposals, that I had to learn the hard way through lots of rejections and learning from, getting dragged through the mud. That, right, the true shortcuts, the true power of artificial intelligence people are seeking. I think they're sometimes just looking for effective mentorship. So take advantage of our resources. We are here to help. Get in touch with Marina, share a little bit about what you're working on, and we'll connect you to the right training for you right now that is going to unlock your progress and help you get to the next level. Hope you guys have a great weekend. For those of you celebrating Easter, have a great Easter, and I look forward to seeing you guys, being in touch in the DMs. All right. Bye, everybody, for now.